Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. I'm your guest today, Brian Bosley, and I just want to thank you all for joining in. And I want to really thank all of you subscribers and all of you members of the Bamboo Pack. When we started July, the summers are a difficult month for podcasts because people are outside a lot. And, they're not really necessarily listening to as many shows. So I really thought July would be, it's going to be a down month for new subscribers and downloads. It actually was the second best that we've had since the beginning, which is 96, 97 episodes. January was a month to beat because we put on 6 or 7 shows that month. We only did 2 in July. And we still had our second best month ever. So I want to thank all of you. We are now have subscribers on 6 continents, 50 states, 60 countries, and 1,714 cities around this globe of ours since this morning, as of this morning. So thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you all. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button, subscribe button, rate, review us, and please share this episode with 3 people you love and care for. All right, I'm going to start off with a real quick heart letter we received last week via text, and that was regarding the episode we did with Shannon Mondor. And this subscriber just said, wow, that Shannon is powerful. Anyone who needs some help, she's the one. And I couldn't agree more. So let's get started today. Today we have a really cool guest, and I had the honor of talking with Brandon last week on the phone, and we met, but not actually officially. I did a small talk in Grand Rapids, Michigan a few weeks ago, and Brandon was one of the men that was involved and was in the audience, and we started talking within 24 hours afterward and hit it off on the phone. So I'm like, dude, I got to get you on here. So today we have Brandon Mulnix on. Just a real quick, because I want his story to dominate today's episode. Brandon professionally is a director of commercial accounts. He's responsible for sales, marketing, and new business development with Prism Controls. But really, man, this guy's a bunch of things. He's like a Renaissance dude. He's been heavily involved in paramedics and saving lives, heavily involved in photography, extreme sports, which we're going to get into today. He's a husband and a father, and he's a man of extreme strong faith. And I just want to, before I even say welcome, I want to read a quote that I found on his social media that I think sums him up. And he wrote this: "To live in every moment is my desire. Adventure is my way of living." So without further ado, Brandon, my friend, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Wow. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate being here today.
It's an honor. And I have a feeling after we talked last week, I was so full of energy. I actually poured myself an extra strong cup of coffee this morning. It's sitting next to me in our micro studio here. So let's just get started. So I've got to know more about you. I've done the research. I've Googled you. I've got to talk to you last week over the phone for quite a while. Can you now share with the Bamboo Pack members out there a little bit about yourself, your childhood, your family, where you came from? You just tell us what you'd like.
Yeah, Brian, I've lived a full life. One of the things that, one of my sheep read kind of about me is, I just strive for being active and adventurous. And one day, when we all get to the end, I just want to be able to look back and say, hey, did I live a full life? And at this point, I've definitely lived a full life. I was born and raised in a little town not too far from where I work called Saranac. Still live there to this day, moved away for all of a year to marry the farmer's daughter in another community. Married, 2 kids, one, when I was, 23, she's now 20, which is crazy to think my daughter's that old. And then I have a son who we adopted when he was 5 from Ethiopia. And, that's its own story and its own journey. As I go back through my childhood, looking and, self-reflecting, I did, I realized that, from a young age, I grew up living headfirst. literally head first. Everything I seem to do in life, I hit my head on. It's kind of this whole subject matter of the story, which is kind of fun. Raised by two hardworking parents. My dad was a volunteer fireman, served 30 years before he retired, kind of gave me that bug for serving the community, giving up, being able to risk my life, running into burning buildings or going on medicals. And then he was an electrician, which all those years of him talking about what he did, no idea that it would come to play one day and I'd be in a similar industry talking about PLCs and controls and all that stuff. So we always had some good, fun conversations. And then my mom, she started a sewing business. I think she sewed from before I was born. And then she made a career of it. And she's still to this day, helping mend people's clothes and alter them to, fit them. Thankfully, not the wedding dresses that she used to do. But yeah, I just had really hardworking parents that, gave me everything I needed in life, showed me what hard work looked like and showed me that, it didn't take a college education to be successful. That we weren't rich, but we lived a good life, and they provided me lots of opportunities. Most of those opportunities were around sports. Played Little League growing up, soccer. And then once I got into high school, it was all about cross-country wrestling and track. And to me, running was an individual sport that I could excel in. And I was never that great. But year after year, coaches would give me awards that were most coachable. And so that meant a lot to me. That's, kind of paved the way for my life is, being coachable. And not knowing really what that meant back in wrestling, other than I would do the thing that my coach would tell me to do. He would show us some weird move that you would think nobody's going to do that. And I would be the one to go out and do it, practice it, and then do it successfully in a match. And so, looking back at sports, it really, built a lot of my foundation of who I was. School came easy for me. I didn't really work that hard. I took a lot of photography classes, which ended up proving to be worth something to me later on in life. And then also just, A's and B's, pretty easy. If I was challenged a little bit more, I might have been, done something more. But I did have a plan for life. During my high school, my senior year, I had to write a scholarship application. And in that scholarship, I was very clear at what I wanted. I wanted to be a full-time fireman. I wanted to own a photography studio. I wanted my white house, be married, have my picket fence, and my 2.3 kids. The fun part was 10 years later, going to one of the teachers that kind of criticized me for having too specific of a 10-year plan, I was able to go back and share my journey and say, hey, I screwed up on the 2.3 kids. A few years later, we ended up adopting my son. And if you go through the adoption process, it seems like a little bit more than just one kid. So I'll count him as the 1.3 kids. But yeah, as I got in the working world, I knew I had goals. I knew that I wanted to be a full-time fireman. So went to the local community college, went to photography school my first year. My morals got in the way. And I decided to switch from photography, which I could do at any point. It's an art. And I realized an arts degree wasn't going to really do anything for me. So I switched over and got my certification as an EMT, as a fireman, Fire 1, Fire 2 back at the time. And I just worked as an EMT. And that next year I became a paramedic. School again, very easy for me. And so got into the field of being a paramedic and just worked. Spent a lot of time, building the life, getting married, having our daughter, finding our house, doing those things. And over that time, I still had that dream of being a full-time fireman. So I kept applying, and I would look and go, okay, what does my resume not have that the other ones had? And come to find out, talk to some people, and my godfather actually said, well, most of them have military background and you don't. So I remember looking at my wife one day going, hey, I want to join the military. And she's like, well, which branch? Oh, the Coast Guard. I could be stationed here in Michigan, reserve, life is good. So another another title to go with life. I joined the Coast Guard, got my resume built up, got the full-time firefighter job at my dream department in Lansing. And I worked there for a few years. And that's also where I realized that not every place you go, you're there for a really long time. I worked there about 3 years, and just, thought, hey, the photography thing's kind of kicking up on the side. I'm not really feeling safe when going in to a fire anymore, just for a lot of reasons. So I said, hey, I'm gonna quit this whole firefighter thing, and I'm gonna go full time in photography. 2009. If you know anything about 2009, that was when GM in the photography industry created thousands of photographers, people that would go out and shoot pictures, and because they were all laid off. They had a severance package, they were laid off, and I had a lot of competition really quickly, and the economy went to crap here in Michigan. So by the end of 2009, I was back being a paramedic, bankrupt, from all the business expenses, the remodel of the studio, stuff like that. But it didn't, I knew that, these were seasons in life. I had to try something. What's the worst thing they could do? I failed. It's money. I can go back and I can, rebuild. And I always had the paramedic thing to back off, to live from. So for the next 10 years, next 10 years were tough. They were probably the toughest. Went through a lot of marriage woes, got into ultra running at that time, started, doing, little runs such as 50-kilometer runs, which is 32 miles, all the way up to 100-mile races. But also in 2011, that's when life really got hard. I was on my way home from paramedic shift, and a car crossed the center line and hit me head on. I was on a little Ford Escort, and I quickly realized that I was allergic to steering wheels. Never knew that was an allergy, but that day I did. Had 12 fractures in my face, and my 14th concussion at that point. Goes back to that head on in life. I kept hitting my head on everything, and that was probably one of the most trying events in my life as well. So
what year was that, Brandon?
2011.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. I think that's you alluded to that on our when we talked last week, but we didn't go into detail.
Yeah, 2011. I mean, it was ironic that it happened because a week before I had that car accident, I had signed up for my first 100-mile race that was going to be that July. And this is February. I'd just gotten back from running my first 50-miler. I was on the runner's high, hey, I can go bigger, farther. And ironically, right before the accident, I'm a man of faith, and I'm a man of, I see where God works, is I was very selfishly praying for my health. I'm like, God, I'm eating this bag of donuts. I want to get faster. I want to get better runner. I just need to be healthier. And 30 minutes later, this car accident happens. And the 12 fractures to my face resulted in my jaw being wired shut for the next 6 months. And it's really hard to eat donuts when your jaw's wired shut. So I saw the irony in that, and the fact that, okay, you want to be healthy? I'm going to make you healthy. And that started an entire journey of health in my marriage and my business and everything that I was doing. It really did start a real big journey in health. But I was able to get back to running 2 months later, just weeks after my jaw was unhooked and free to eat again. I was out. I ran my first 100-kilometer race, 62 miles. And then later that summer, ran a 100-mile race, which is kind of what led me to probably the grit and determination of later that summer. I found out that my jaw had refractured from not healing correctly. I was in the middle of that 100-mile race, and I felt a real bad pain. And ironically enough, when your body hurts and you feel something in your mouth, you're like, okay, why am I feeling something in my mouth? And so I went back, had to have my jaw rewired shut. And then that's where, I'm like, okay, what can I do with this to make things, make things for the good? Because going back to the surgery, the day I was in the hospital after the accident, I just remember, all of the patients I've had and all of the ways they responded to the worst day of their life. When you call an ambulance, it's not the best day of your life. It's usually, your mom's sick, your dad's sick, or you're, having a really bad day where you have to call an ambulance. And I remember their reactions. And I made a point that day to say, this is not going to negatively affect me. I'm not going to let, this head injury, and I'm not going to let this, this fractured jaw, I'm not going to let the consequences, the effects of this accident negatively affect me. And I remember making that decision. And from that point during my recovery, I did everything I could to bring joy to those around me. And so fast forward back to August, I'm rewired shut. What can I do to make this a positive for somebody? And I couldn't eat, I couldn't eat nutrition like everybody else could. I had to drink Boost and sure McDonald's chocolate shakes were, I remember how many of those I ate during that period of time, but I also still wanted to run. So at that point, I raised food for a foundation for a local food bank, just had people sponsor me as I decided to go and run a 50-mile race with my jaw wired shut. And that was probably physically the hardest thing I've ever done. But looking back, even during that race, I made a lifelong friend of another runner who was struggling and had no idea that my jaw was wired shut as I helped her get to the finish line as I needed somebody along the finish line. She needed a coach. She needed somebody there for her. And in my misery, my pain, I could look past and say, hey, how can I get you through this? And to this day, we're lifelong friends and keep connected about that. But even that period of time, getting through all of that and getting 5 minutes of fame, I realized that, running was okay, but running became such an identity to me, and it became such a distraction to so many other things. It became a distraction for me being a dad. It became a distraction for me being a good husband. Probably my coworkers should say, hey, yeah, you were pretty absent during that time. All your focus was specifically on your personal life. But it did take my mind away from the trauma of being a paramedic. It did take my mind away from the stress of everyday life, because when I run, my mind is able to go and concentrate on things. And the way my mind was back then, it was very, what's next? But it was very selfish. You spend hours and hours running on a trail and you're just thinking about yourself and what you could do to better your personal life. And that's, some of the I guess that's how running became almost like a drug to me, where I just keep going out there running and getting accolades and recognition. And then in the end, it was really, breaking down my relationships with people, because it was more self-centered and self-focused, and anything in too much can be a bad thing. So shortly after that, my wife and I were blessed to adopt. And that's a really, really long story that I don't think this podcast has enough time to go into. But through that process, I had to do a lot of self-reflection. I had to get myself right in order to be a dad to a son after I spent the last 3-4 years being very selfish in life. But I was blessed from the accident. Was able to, have a little bit of extra financial ability to go to Ethiopia with my pastor, document the process, and then meet my son there. And while we were there, we didn't know we were going to adopt. And so by the grace of God, many miracles happened, and we were able to bring him home about 10 months later. And that's kind of where ultra running took a back seat in life. I'd run a little bit here, 5K, 10K. I think I even got up to a half marathon once after 2012, 2013. But I kind of just stepped away. And that's when, being a paramedic, that's when depression started stepping in life. And what I mean by that is, going through life, you can only get so much satisfaction from helping people, especially if you're going into it with that mentality of, hey, I saved their life. Why is there no gratitude from that? And realizing that, in those moments, that's not when gratitude really does happen. And so, 7, more years go by, and I finally get to where I'm coming up, and, I've got to make some life decisions on career. I can stay in the same field, or I can start to look out and do other things. So about 2013, I remember talking with my boss at the time and saying, "Hey, what did you do to get to where you're at?" And he's like, "I went back to college." And of course, 14 head injuries in. My doctor at that point said, "If you ever want to go to college, you're going to have to quit all your jobs and focus on college, because there's no way you're going to be able to focus and get through this. You got traumatic induced ADD, which anybody who knew me before my accident probably would say I already had ADD. But it was, the effects of that head injury were much deeper than I anticipated. I was happy to say in 2 years, finished my bachelor's degree, summa cum laude from local university, all online, all finding ways to get around the ADD effects, such as audiobooks and, just the community of classmates and asking for help and just focused on it. And being an adult, classes were easy. But that actually helped lead me to, okay, I have a degree now. Now I have this career as a paramedic, fireman, photographer, owned a business, all these things. What can I do in life? How do I, as I sat in an ambulance, watching airplanes fly by, how do I get one of those jobs where people fly across the globe? How do I get that job? Did I check the wrong box at career day? And so again, that coachability comes in. Well, I had a guidance counselor in high school help me. So why not go find a guidance counselor? So I went to a counselor. Well, come to find out, there was more underlining there, needed a little bit more counseling to find out why I wanted to change careers. And it's just ironic that, I went to counseling on a Tuesday or Thursday, and on a Sunday, that same week had the worst call of my career. That said, okay, it's time to get out. There's no more of this needed. Because I told that counselor, if I never have to see the things again that I've experienced, I would be fine. So then the experiencing that week lasted a couple more months. But part of the process of when you're in that self-reflection was going in, and there's so many resources out there. There's friends, there's family. And so in this case, I had a whole business book of customers that I could reach out to and say, hey, what skills do you see in me that are outside of being, a photographer or a paramedic? And thankfully a great CEO, took the time, invested in me and said, hey, that's project management. And of course I have no idea what it is. And so, just listened to him, ended up applying for a job within his company and worked, left EMS and got into the role of project management. And again, 3 years go by and walk in on a Tuesday and I walk in on a Thursday and my department's cut. Budget cuts come in and boom, my entire department's gone. But having the wherewithal, I remember that day very specifically saying that he was going to have a worse day than I was. My life had, I've prepared myself for bad days. I've, gotten through a lot of worse things than that. And I knew that I could find another job. He's the one who had to tell 20 some people that day that, they were without a job. So he had a rougher day than I did that day. And then God blessed me with the job I'm in now, where I've been able to succeed. So, so there's my story. It's crazy.
I just got to recap a couple things here, Brandon, before we go on. And I think this is so good for you out there listening in the audience right now is, number one, if you caught this, what Brandon said at the very beginning is he focuses on living a full life. And part of the way he does that is he just remains very coachable. I mean, the fact that he reached out to a counselor, that he reached out to clients and the CEO, he listened to people, going back to his guidance counselor, and he remembered he had a guidance counselor in high school, his wrestling coach, winning most coachable. The power of that being coachable is to me, it's the most powerful skill set you can have, because once you close up that mind and you close up your patent office and don't want to invent any more changes in your life, your comfort zone is it is stagnant where it's going to be now. But by the way, everybody, you're going to hear some clanging around. Brand, they're having some roof work done. He warned that before we started the podcast today. So if you hear the banging, just know that they're having work done on the roof at where he is in his location right now. So. But I really liked what you said, and this is an important element too. You did that thesis in school, and you put down what you wanted to be: firefighter, 2.3 kids or 2 point whatever the number is, be married and all this, and then you earn that. And I think so often, a lot of times, people want these vague long-term goals, and I think the more specific any goal we can set, the more likely you're going to hit it. Now, you might not hit the exact goal, because goals are a moving target, but the more specificity you put into your goal and your aspirations, what you're doing is you're slowing down that target, so you have a much more higher likelihood of hitting at least very close to the bullseye. But I'm so impressed. So I got to ask a question. So after your car accident in February of 2011, how many races did you do that year again? I got 3 down, a 60, 100, and then the...
Oh, I did. Yeah. I've got probably 12 or 13 ultra marathons under my belt. 2 100 milers. I did go after finishing 100 once. I had to, prove to myself I could do it again. And then I did a number of other distances that were less than 100 miles.
Whew. I mean, the thing is, you did in the same year of your accident, though, in 2011, you were racing that year, correct?
Correct, yes.
I mean, so think about that out there. Is one of the things after his car accident, 12 fractures in his face, his jaw wired shut. It got his 14th concussion during that accident, 14 in his life. Then he said, "This is not going to. I'm not going to let this affect me negatively." And he started focusing on bringing joy to other people. And I like that idea, that 150-mile race, when you help that other runner through the race. And in that, you gained some 5 minutes of fame, which you alluded to, but you just bypass it. I want to go back to that. What was your 5 minutes of fame?
A local paper picked up the article, wrote a nice story about just the food raiser I did. And it was just incredible amount of food that was raised, like, I don't remember, like 8,000 cans of food to local food banks. And then it got picked up on that AP press. And next thing I know, I'm getting called from people around the country going, "Hey, we just heard about you on the news." And I was blown away. Like, what do you mean by that? And so I started Googling my name, and I realized that the article had been picked up by Sports Illustrated, been picked up by ESPN Radio. There were some radio stations that were making light of it and kind of having fun with it. And so I just laughed, and, I'm a good sport with all of that, and, all the jokes that were made and comments and all that stuff, because I had no idea that, running 50 miles with my jaw wired shut was going to be my way of making it to be famous. And one of the most things I'm proud of was later that year, Runner's World contacted me and did an article about the same, what it takes. And it's just about the grit and the heart of running 50 miles with your jaw wired shut. And that was one of those things I could go back to that same teacher who was also a cross-country coach and show her, just to say, "Hey, one of your runners made Runner's World." It wasn't for speed.
Well, I got to tell you, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I wanted to be a long-distance runner. My frame isn't really made for that now. Maybe if I would have really worked on it, but I was really into running, and I was a heavily subscriber to Runner's World and Running Magazine, and I would read all about. I think it was Sebastian Coe was one of the world leaders at the time in running. I think that was his name, and I mean, I wish I had all those old magazines, but I think the longest race I ever ran was 8.3, and that was the Mackinac Island Road Race around the island twice. I did that in 7th and 8th grade, and since then I've only done 5Ks. So man, you doing a 100-miler. In fact, we got to tell the audience, today is Tuesday, the 1st of August, and you're flying out to Washington here in a couple of days. Can you tell the audience what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, you see, after all these years of taking a break, I decided, one of my self-reflections was to get healthier last summer. And I realized I was missing running. And so last fall, I started running, and I had the goal of getting the marathon again. And after taking 10 years off, your body definitely is back to square one. And so my goal was a marathon. And then secretly, my goal was to run an ultra marathon again. And so Saturday, I will be running around Mount St. Helens, which is a 50-kilometer race in just some of the most rugged rock and elevation change. And just, it's going to be an adventure.
Oh, man. That's powerful. And by the time we air this, you will have already run and everything. But I can tell you, I have it in my calendar already for on Friday to start thinking about you over the weekend. I'll be sending my prayers and some real positive thoughts for you to have an incredible, safe, and productive and amazing, memorable journey on that race, my friend. So, but I thought what you said, Brandon, was really powerful too, and that running it was an outlet for you, and it was such an incredibly powerful, positive outlet. But at the same time, it became a distraction for other parts of your life. It became a distraction away from your family, and you had to realize that you were becoming a little self-focused and self-centered, and you dove into that self-reflection. And that self-reflection for so many people is such a scary concept, to stop and really give yourself a good internal audit of where am I right now in all aspects of my life in pertaining to where I really want to end, and to realize that it's not just about one element. It's not just about the running or the business or just the family. We juggle all these priorities in our life on a consistent basis. And what I term that phrase conscious living. And a person who can live consciously is a person who can look at all the important aspects of their journey and their life here and try to, you don't balance them. I don't like the term balance because I think it's difficult to balance, but I love the term blend, where we can put, it's like juggling. If you're juggling tennis balls, sometimes when you're juggling, one tennis ball's on the top, one's on the bottom, and the other one's on the side. But as long as they rotate and they're all getting the proper amount of attention and priority throughout your life is important. And that self-reflection that you did allows you to continue that motion forward of juggling all the priorities in your life and blending them together in a really healthy unit. And I thought that was really important for people to really understand is the power behind self-reflection. And that's the ability to change. And that's, that keeping open-mindedness, coachability, and that self-reflection is really what has allowed you to really live so far an incredibly full life. And I don't see that changing anytime soon for you. I don't think you're going to get back from Seattle the next week or from Washington and say, okay, I'm done now. I'm just going to sit down and watch Netflix for the next 10 years of my life. So, I have a feeling that grit, that passion that you carry is I think it's going to continue on, and we're going to be probably having you on here in another year or two for your next adventure that you've gone on or you're going on. So, I kind of asked you the question. I didn't ask you what's the most difficult thing you've ever gone through, but I'm assuming that the car accident was one of the more challenging aspects of your life. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that was probably the most physically and where it led in my life. I mean, of all the different challenges I had after that was the culminating event for that, for sure. So,
Brandon, you're a unique dude, obviously, and I picked up on that last week when we spoke. And so growing up, let's just put your mom and dad were hardworking, amazing people. But if we could, even setting them aside for just a minute, was there another person or event or book or experience that was an inspiration to you growing up to turn you to the kind of person you are today?
Yeah. It's interesting because the man that meant a lot to me, has since fallen out of grace with a lot of people just based on some of his life choices in life. But it was definitely one of my school teachers who, he was a paramedic and went on to be a school teacher. I remember hearing stories of him jumping out of airplanes, just being that adventure. But he had a huge impact in my life, all back in the fourth grade, and just, picked on me, but yet also just invested in me, and then went on to be a coach of mine. So yeah, I'm not going to name him, but yeah, he was fine. Definitely one of my fourth grade teachers. Was one of my biggest inspirations. and, even his life journeys helped me, be aware of other things in my life as well, that you can always fall from grace later in life. And then hopefully his story is a chance of rebuilding as well.
Well, I would say one of my biggest inspirations I feel the same way about is a person who has made some horrible and horrific personal choices, but still at a certain time in my life when I needed someone to believe in me and someone I could look up to for a period for a brief moment of my life, of my existence. We all have those people. They're not perfect, but we tend to think that all forms of inspiration have to be perfection, just like we think all historical figures have led perfect lives when none of us do. So I'm glad you didn't name the person, but I'm glad you can see that there's still, you got value out of somebody who made personal choices down the road that you didn't agree with. So, well, let me ask you now. Okay, so you've done a lot. I didn't realize you were in the Coast Guard. I didn't know that, and I got to tell you, I was one of my best friends retired 4 years ago as a colonel in the Marine Corps, and he was telling me that the Coast Guard and the Marines are two of the toughest boot camps to go through. And I didn't realize that about the Coast Guard. I heard it's incredibly challenging to go through that boot camp. Was that true when you went through it?
I was 22 when I went through, and I was actually in pretty okay physical health. I didn't find it a challenge just because of the mental side of it. I was a little older. So for me, I didn't realize it was supposed to be so tough. So I laughed my way through it, lost a bunch of weight through it, and I enjoyed it. So.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I've heard that the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps have gotten together. And I don't know if the Coast Guard went to the Marine Corps and said, "Hey, we want to learn what you guys are doing here." And anyway, my friend said they have an incredibly challenging boot camp to get through. It's right up there with the Marine Corps as the toughest one. So now I know you have a ton of passion. I think it was when we talked last week, we kind of determined that your unique, outstanding quality, or as I term it, your butter, going back to a previous episode I did, your real uniqueness is your passion, your energy, and your drive. So with that being said, right now, what do you consider to be a win or a victory in your life?
Yeah, a win or a victory. It's interesting because I always have to go back and compare to, lives saved or that when I, in the hero days of being a paramedic is what I call it. Now it's just having a positive effect on people's lives, whether that's interns working with us, whether that's a customer. I just love solving problems for people. But when I solve the problem, the win is more about the relationship and the eternal, benefit. Am I leaving them a better person than the way I came? And with that passion, it's easy for me to, drive 100 miles an hour, but just being able to slow down and walk alongside them at whatever speed they're at in life and just be able to help them in their need and where they're at. That's my win in today's time.
And I got to believe at the pace you go at, not just physically, but also kind of mentally, you have to slow down at times and let people catch up. I could see you really moving forward at a pace where you're looking and going, wait a minute, everybody else is still 12 steps behind me. I have to let them come with me. Do you find that to be a challenge at times?
Oh, yes. Going back, I talked about my dad being an electrician and all the things that I've been blessed with. The vision. When I see a new problem or a new solution, I'm like 10 steps way past people. Things like a new product development and all these features that are on version 3, and we're still back in the prototype. So I have to slow down and go, oh, back up. Okay, where are we focused on? How are we going to successfully launch version 1? And, oh, by the way, version 2, 3, 4, and 5 are coming out there. So I'm very visionary in that realm of being able to see solutions and what it could mean for the greater world. And I need to come back. And what does it mean for our team and our customers now?
And that's the beauty of being a visionary. There's so much strength in being a visionary, but the biggest detriment is being frustrated at times or impatient with those who can't yet quite grasp the vision. And, I like the fact that you brought up, if you didn't use this word, but one of the things I've picked up on this conversation so far is you have a great deal of empathy. helping the fellow runner, racer in the race when your jaw was wired shut. You're talking about developing other people and solving problems and impacting people's lives, and even having that self-awareness to say, wait a minute, I know I have a visionary mindset. And so many visionaries that I speak with or work with, Brandon, their biggest problem is they get so frustrated with everybody else, but they have to realize that's just not their strength. I love Michael Gerber's concept in his works on the E-Myth Revisited, when he talks about there are entrepreneurs, which are visionaries. There are managers who manage the vision, and then there are technicians who do the actual work or that technical work. And when visionaries and entrepreneurs just go off on their own, I mean, it's like we talked about in the pre-show today. We can't do this on our own. We need the managers. We need the technicians, and it takes an extra special person to realize it and to pull everybody alongside them and work. Kind of bring them up as a high tide raises all ships. That's a rare gift, and I think it all comes with a lot of that empathy that you share that you have for other people. So, kudos to you, my friend.
Well, at 44 years old, and I still want to be coachable, and that's the thing as I look around and, want to encourage listeners is, where you're at today doesn't mean where you're going to be at tomorrow. And most of the time, what I've learned is what holds most people back is fear. Fear of success, fear of failure. You've talked about that on a lot of your episodes. But it's getting past that to realize, there is more available, and, what are you doing to strive? I remember us talking about, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, going running. Well, that just puts me ahead mentally amongst those people I work with. I'm able to get all that energy out by 9 o'clock. I'm already, 5 hours into my day, and my brain is just, went through all that adrenaline dump of running, and some of my best ideas are during that time. And so, that's just that physical exercise is part of that. And just,
it's a different breed. Even to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning is a different breed. When you go for a 10-mile run or longer, and I think when I talked to you last week, you said, I just did a 10-mile this morning. I'm like, dude, I've never run 10 miles in my life. In one fell swoop. I'm a 5K a day guy. I mean, 4 days a week, 5K, and that's my sweet spot for running. But I have a lot of respect for people. I know a friend of mine did a 100-miler. Actually, the same gentleman who retired from the Marine Corps did a 100-miler. Oh my goodness, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Because I knew, maybe longer. For his birthday, his wife flew him, I believe, from Paris Island when he was stationed to see me in East Grand Rapids. That was his birthday gift. He spent 4 or 5 days with me, and he had just finished a 100-miler. And I was boggled. I'm like, what? But it's interesting because so many of the guests I've had on here are ultra athletes, do the extreme sports, whether it's a lot of them are, Ironman or I don't know if I've met any 100-milers yet on this podcast. Maybe I have, but, very long distance. And it boggles my mind that the human body can actually do that. It's the David Goggins type of mentality that is inspiring. And I use that in a lot of other aspects of my life, but I don't think I'll ever do a 100-miler. I think I'll stick with my 5K and let you do those. And you can tell me about the experience when you get back. But I love the aspect, and I think this is so true. And we've talked about this a lot on the show over the time, is getting up in the morning and having a morning routine. It might not be running 10 miles, but getting up and doing something physical every morning, doing something spiritual every morning, something intellectual every morning, and something emotional every morning. It can be a quick, brisk walk, a stretch, meditation, journaling, prayer, gratitude journal, reading, whatever it might be. But having that morning routine is so incredibly powerful. And obviously it has helped you dramatically out through your life, both personally and professionally, Brandon. And I can't stress that enough to the listener out there right now who might be stuck in a little bit of a rut in life and stuck on that hamster wheel and spinning around and around, is start a morning routine. It doesn't have to be 5 o'clock. I would recommend 5 o'clock. That's a good witching hour, man, to get up and have a good couple of hours of just getting your life and your day scheduled and set physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. But that's important. And one of the things I've learned, Brandon, over the past several months is I have an incredibly structured morning routine. I don't have a good evening routine. And that's when I'm actually going back home this afternoon for a couple or 3 weeks, before I travel again. And that's my focus over that 3 weeks, is to structure a good morning or evening routine that doesn't involve me cracking a gin and tonic. It doesn't involve me watching, 3 hours of television, which I'm not a big fan of TV anyway, but I'm looking to put, what can I do in the evening? I'm done with my working out. It's probably going to be reading, some prayer, maybe some meditation. But I think having that evening routine may not be as important as a morning routine, but it's still a rather important part of our lives. So do you do anything in the evening that kind of encapsulates your day?
Brian, you just described my evening perfectly. That's why I'm going to ask you, hey, how does this go in the next couple of weeks? Let me know how that goes, because I have that same fault. I get done with the end of the day, and it's just the schedule of life with my wife. She gets home from work around 7:30 after being a nurse all day. And it's like trying to find that balance, taking the dog for a walk. That's probably one of my, most refreshing moments, spending time with my son, my daughter before she runs off to work, I guess more reacting. But, I also find boredom in that time period, as well. So there's a challenge there, being wired the way I'm wired. But yeah, let me know how it goes over the next couple of weeks, because you may be able to give me some pointers. And it gets only worse in the wintertime when it's dark outside.
Well, it's dark at 5:15 and 5:30 here in Michigan. We get 4 or 5 hours before we go to bed. And that's the way I've described it. You said boredom. I was always using the word loneliness. I felt loneliness at night. And I think it's because mornings I'm fired up. I can't wait to get out of bed in the morning. And then I have client calls, and I'm on the phone with my family, and sometimes running up to see my children or my grandson or whatever it might be when I'm when I'm home. And then I get done at like 5 o'clock, and it's like, I think boredom's a better word to use, because loneliness is a real powerful word. And I wanted to kind of get away from that word, but I think it is. It's boredom for me. I'm like, now what? I just want to go to bed so I can get up in the morning again, But I'll test a few things, and I'll get back with you when you get back from Washington. I'll be the guinea pig on what works and what doesn't work, at least for guys like us. So, all right, this is my favorite question, Brandon. And that if I'm gonna drive over and see you today, which I could, because I wouldn't have to fly. We're close enough. But if I were, and I had a time machine, and you and I were to fly back to, let's just say maybe you were 20 years old or some former age in your life, you can choose the age, and you were to sit down and talk to your former self, that younger version of Brandon Mulnix, what would you say to yourself? What piece of advice, words of wisdom, recipes for success or happiness would you share?
I'm going to go back, to 20. Around that time, I remember saying something very specific that, I looked at my life around me and I said, hey, you know what? I can't have a good testimony unless I have tests. And I'm okay with that. And to go back and say, what? You're absolutely correct. Life is going to come at you much harder, much more dramatic than you could ever imagine, but you've got the grit, you've got the power, believe in yourself more, maybe be a little less selfish, a little less self-centered, love your kids, love your wife more. Those are the keys, that I would probably tell myself, because I wouldn't take away anything that happened to me. That's made me who I am. And you can't be a sharp sword without a lot of pounding. You can't be a strong sword without a lot of pounding. And so I'm okay with that. It's just, but looking back, you got a good life ahead of you. Just, be present along the way.
So let's recap that for the audience member out there. So this is a powerful statement here. There are no testimonials without tests. And life is going to throw a lot at you. Life is going to beat us down. It's going to knock us down. And within those tests, believe in yourself. Know that you have the grit to get through this. And throughout while you're getting through it, don't be so self-centered. Love the people around you. Love your family. Love your friends. Love your community. And another good statement is a sharp. What I think was you can't have a sharp or strong sword without a lot of pounding. Powerful stuff. So when whoever's right now is going through that pounding, who is going through those tests in life, remember, this is where your testimonials in life begin. This is the story you tell your children and grandchildren. This is the legacy you leave others to inspire them, to impact other people around you, is how you handle this. Because I had a guest on back, I don't know how many months ago, and he was saying that something to the effect that, this can either be, it can, oh my goodness, I forget how we rate. Anyway, it was all about the choices you make during the tests of life are going to determine whether that test was a failure or a success for you. And you have 100% control over that choice. It's how you deal with it. And that, you and I alluded to this a little bit in our call last week, Brandon. We talked a little bit about, I recommend the book, I think, called The Obstacle is the Way. I could be wrong. I don't know if I recommended it or not, but, they talk about the philosophy of Stoicism. Ryan Holiday is a modern day Stoic, and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, I think, was one, and quite a few people were back in the day. And it's all about, it's not how life treats us; it's how we react to life's treatment of us that makes all the difference in the world. And every obstacle that we have in life, that is the way to success. The obstacle is the way to happiness, to fulfillment. And so many people see the obstacle and they either back away from it or they allow the obstacle to beat them down. And I do believe that, like you said, no testimonials in life without true tests. And, you got to hear my testimonial a couple of weeks ago in Ada. We talked, and it was so inspiring to hear other men come up to me, and the phone calls and emails and texts I've received since, and with other men sharing me with the testimonials they've gone through, the difficulties, and some of them still going through those, and how they're starting to realize now, probably because of the amazing group that RJ Boudreau put together in Ada at the barn, they can see that is my way out of the issues I have in my life. This is not another struggle for me to fail. It's a struggle for me to prove how badly I want something. And if you ever get a chance, maybe you've watched this before, but Brandon, there's a video and there's a book out there called The Last Lecture, and it was by Randy Pausch. He was a Carnegie Mellon University professor who died back maybe 10, 12 years ago of pancreatic cancer. And he had the opportunity, as he was a Carnegie Mellon University computer science professor. And because he knew he was dying, he obviously retired, and the Carnegie Mellon University allowed him to do a final lecture. And they videotaped it. And he gave the lecture to his young boys who he knew they would grow up without him being present with him here on Earth. And so he talked, and he said part of the lecture on the video, which he then turned into a best-selling book before he passed away. He talks to his boys, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing to some degree, he said, you're going to come across brick walls all throughout your life. Some tall, some medium, some extremely high. Those brick walls are not there for you to turn on and walk away with your head down. Those brick walls are for you to prove how badly you want what's on the other side. And I just think that's such a powerful statement. And that's exactly what you've been doing. You've turned these testimonials into these tests into testimonials. And I think that's very powerful. So I love it. What's next for you, my friend? I mean, you come back next week. You've run the out in Washington in Mount St. Helen. What's next? What's your next big adventure in life or focus?
My next big adventure, my next focus is going to be on planning what that next big event, that next focus is. Do some more self-reflection, take some time and figure out what the next 5 to 10 years of life is going to be. Because, I've realized in this time that, I've met every career goal I've ever had. I'm in the best place I've ever been. This job I'm in, utilizes all of the skills and all of the talents that, I was born for this. This job, this position, the people I'm in, the culture I get to help form, and I can only imagine what God has planned for me in the next 5, 10 years, but I need to take some time and stop and see where running fits in, see where, I can be a better husband, better dad, and just keep getting healthier. Just keep working on my health, and that is vision. That is finding out that goal, so I can set my mind, and both personally and professionally.
Love it. Well, you just made a statement that we talked about earlier. So, audience member out there. So, before the show today, we were talking, and Brandon said, "I wish you still had that theme song, Born for This, by The Score." Because I had it for a while. It was actually going to be my theme song until I got some pushback from people saying, hey, you might want to get that off before you get sued. because I didn't ever mention it. But that's kind of his theme song is. So if anybody got a chance out there, go out there. I think it's called Born for This or something. I think that's by the Score. Google that song and listen to it. Man, it's a powerful song. It's so powerful. I wish I could still use it. I reached out to the band a couple of times, haven't heard anything back from them. So I decided not to use it several months ago. Probably more than a year ago. We stopped using that theme song for the intro, but it definitely is Brandon's theme song. And I can see it could be a theme song for many people out there. So, all right. So as we wrap up, one final question, Brandon, is there any question that I did not ask you that you wish I would have, or is there any final message you want to leave to that member out there, that Bamboo Pack member, that subscriber who's struggling right now?
Yeah, I'm going to just go back to the coachability, be coachable. And then when you are coached, help coach others. Share your testimony. It's given to you through all your tests, trials, tribulations, but it can be very powerful to help others. Thank you, Brian, for, this platform where I'm able to share my testimony. Similar to RJ's and his platform at the barn. It's just a place where people can share their story, help form the thoughts in their head, and be proud of your story. So for the listeners, definitely share your story. It could definitely improve. It may not be on a podcast, but it might be helping volunteering at a local organization where you're able to work with a youth. You've lived, your story might influence somebody, and it doesn't have to be as crazy as my story. It's your story. Mm-hmm. It's your adventure. But you have to, one, self-reflect long enough to know what that adventure is and what that story is. And then you have to, and I'm assuming since your podcast is mostly for, people on that hamster wheel in life or, striving to be their perfect self or I'm hoping there's more out there that'll listen to this and grow from that too. But yeah, share your story.
I can't think of a better way to capsulize this. So everybody out there, just to listen again, because I know a lot of you are riding, you're driving, you're running, you're on your treadmill, whatever it might be. Just listen to the brief little summary that Brandon just shared. Be coachable. Stay coachable, but also help coach others. And one of the best ways to do that is to share your story, share your testimony, and be proud of your story. Because everybody's story is different. And I think so often we think that the story we have is they're all unique, but there are other people's stories who mirror our own at times. And we can learn from those people, and you can teach other people how to go through life a little bit better, maybe a little more, with a little more dignity, integrity, honor, courage, whatever it might be, competence. And you can't do that until you self-reflect, which has been a common theme in Brandon's story and message today. Is self-reflection is so incredibly powerful. And man, it's so scary for us, but a lot of us to slow down in life and self-reflect. And a good friend of mine shared with me in college, he said, I think the two of us go so fast in life because we're afraid if we stop, our stench from our past will catch up with us. And that's really what sometimes self-reflection is it's slowing down and letting everything from the past catch up with us and really dissecting that. And then with that, you find your test, you find your testimony, you find your story. And with that story, you can build from there. You can write the next chapter in your story, and you can share it with others to help them write their next chapter. So I can't imagine a more succinct message that we shared in the last 55 minutes, hour, whatever it might have been, that could change a person's life. So Brandon, thanks, my friend, man. Thank you for being just an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, we're going to be rooting for you. I know by the time this airs, you'll be back home, but I'll be rooting for you, praying for you, sending positive vibes this weekend, my friend. And you'll probably get a text from me. Just ignore it because you'll be busy getting your body and your mind psyched up for this, but make it memorable, man. Make it another part of your story. All right, everyone out there, please, thank you again for listening in. Please hit that subscribe, like button, rate, review us, and please share this message. Text it, email, whatever you might need to do. Share it with 3 other people. Let's get Brandon's message of self-reflection, of coachability, of grit, and passion and drive out to the people you love and care about in your world. I'll talk to you in a week. In the meantime, please remember, everybody, get out there and strive, love, and live. See you guys.